Captain Nam stood in the observation deck of the Terran Orbital Heritage Station, looking out at the rows of ancient warships floating in the darkness of space. Each vessel was a piece of history, perfectly preserved and maintained. Some were 300 years old, others only 100. All of them had once been weapons of war. Now they were just memories in metal and glass. Was 52 years old and had spent the last 15 years as the director of this floating museum. He loved these ships. He knew every bolt, every wire, every system. The USS Perseverance was his favorite, a massive dreadnought from the 23rd century with ion engines, and that could punch holes through asteroids. Next to it floated the Indomitable, even older, with chemical rockets and primitive fission reactors. And at the far end was the Defiance, a retrofitted aircraft carrier from Earth's early space age, barely 300 years old but ancient by modern standards. "Captain, we have an incoming transmission from Earth Command," said Lieutenant Park, walking up behind him. She was 28, brilliant with machines, and could make any of these old systems work like new. "It's marked urgent." Turned from the window, put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral's weathered face. The Admiral was 61 and commanded Earth's modern defense fleet. He looked tired. "Captain Nam, I'm sure you've heard the news by now," said without greeting. "About the aliens?" "Yes, sir. The whole station has been talking about nothing else for 2 days. The Dominion had arrived at the edge of the solar system 3 days ago. Their ships were massive, sleek, and powerful beyond anything humanity had ever built. They had sent a simple message: surrender or be destroyed. Earth had 7 days to decide. There's been a development," continued. "They have agreed to diplomatic talks. They want to tour some of our facilities first. Show of good faith, they say. They've requested to see military installations. Had a bad feeling about where this was going, and they want to see the Heritage Station. Tomorrow, I'm sorry, but this comes from the President herself." After the transmission ended, gathered his small crew. There were only 200 people on the station, most of them technicians and historians. Doctor, the weapons specialist, looked worried. She was 45 and knew more about old military technology than anyone alive. "They're going to laugh at us," said quietly. "These ships are centuries behind their technology." "Let them laugh," replied, though he felt the same concern. "Just make sure everything is running perfectly. I want these ships looking their best." The next day they arrived. Their shuttle was small but elegant, made of some material that seemed to shift colors in the light. When the airlock opened, Commander stepped out, followed by 4 other officers. They were tall, with skin and too many joints in their arms. Their eyes were large and dark. Looked around the docking bay with what seemed like amusement. "This is your military heritage?" he asked in perfect English, translated by the device on his chest. "Yes, Commander," said, keeping his voice even. "These are the warships that served humanity for 3 centuries." They walked through the station, stopping at each ship. At every vessel, and his officers made comments. At the Perseverance, examined the ion engines and laughed. "You used controlled particle streams for propulsion. How primitive. Our ships fold space itself." At the Indomitable, he stared at the electromagnetic acceleration of solid projectiles. "We manipulate matter at the quantum level. We reshape reality." When they reached the Defiance, the oldest ship couldn't contain himself. He laughed out loud, a strange clicking sound. "This vessel used chemical combustion, explosives in tubes. This is what you preserve." He turned to, "Captain, your species holds on to garbage. These boats are toys compared to our technology." Stepped forward, her face red with anger, but touched her arm and shook his head. "These ships served us well," he said simply. "I'm sure they did," replied, still amused. "Against other primitives using similar garbage. You understand our weapons don't fire projectiles, yes. They alter the fundamental properties of matter. Our shields exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. These museum pieces would be destroyed before they could even target our ships. The tour ended badly. The left, still laughing among themselves, stood in the observation deck again, watching their shuttle depart, joined him. "They're probably right," she said softly. "What could these old ships do against technology we don't even understand?" "Maybe nothing," admitted, "but they don't understand something important." "What's that?" "These ships weren't built for exploration. They weren't built for science or discovery. They were built when humans were fighting humans, built for real war, ugly war, the kind where you use everything you have just to survive." The next day, the message came from Earth. The had rejected all diplomatic solutions. They gave humanity 72 hours to surrender completely or be annihilated. Admiral appeared on the transmission again, but this time he looked different, defeated. "It's over," he said. "We're going to surrender. There's no point in fighting. Our best military analysts have studied their technology. We can't hurt them. Every simulation says the same thing. We'd lose everything." Stood in the war room of the Heritage Station with his senior staff. And Chief Petty Officer, the weapons specialist, was 42 and had served on modern warships before joining the Heritage Station. She knew both old and new systems. "There has to be something we can do," said. "With what?" asked. "The Admiral is right. The modern fleet uses quantum shields, plasma weapons, AI targeting, the best technology we have. If that won't work, what will?" Looked out at the museum ships floating in formation outside. Old, obsolete, useless. Or were they? He said slowly, "Their shields work by phasing matter, right? Existing in multiple dimensions." "That's what the intelligence reports suggest," confirmed. "And their weapons manipulate quantum states, molecular bonds, things like that." "Yes." Felt something forming in his mind. A crazy idea. What if we hit them with something that doesn't use any of that? Something so primitive their systems won't know what to do with it. Everyone stared at him. "You mean the museum ships?" asked, her eyes widening. "Captain, these vessels are 300 years old, some older. If the modern fleet can't beat them—" "The modern fleet uses modern technology," interrupted. "Quantum this, plasma that, all sophisticated, all elegant. These ships," he gestured at the window, "these ships just hit things, hard, with metal and explosives and nuclear fission. Maybe that's exactly what we need." Was already pulling up data on her tablet, her fingers moving fast. "The shields phase solid matter by manipulating probability fields, but that requires the matter to have quantum uncertainty. A simple kinetic projectile, moving fast enough, has no uncertainty. It's just mass and velocity." "Their weapons work on molecular restructuring," added, getting excited. "But a nuclear explosion doesn't care about molecules. It's just atom splitting. Basic physics." "This is insane," said, but she was smiling. "It might actually work." Opened a communication channel to Earth Command. "Get me Admiral. Tell him I have an idea, a very old idea." The emergency meeting took 3 hours. Captain Nam stood before a holographic display showing President, Admiral, and 24 military advisors. He explained his plan carefully, using simple words for a simple idea. Hit though with old weapons. Weapons so basic they might actually work. Admiral looked skeptical. "Captain Nam, I respect your dedication to these museum pieces, but this is suicide. You're suggesting we fight an advanced alien fleet with technology from 3 centuries ago." "I'm suggesting we fight them with technology they've never seen," corrected. "Technology so primitive it might not register as a threat until it's too late." Doctor stepped forward on the transmission. "Mr. President, I've run the calculations. The defenses are incredibly sophisticated. They're designed to counter energy weapons, quantum attacks, AI-guided missiles. But a simple chunk of metal moving at high velocity, their shields might not even activate." "Might not," repeated. "You're basing this on speculation." "We're basing it on physics," replied firmly. "Their technology manipulates quantum states and probability fields. Our old weapons don't use any of that. They use Newton's laws. Force equals mass times acceleration. You can't hack that. You can't phase through it. You can only try to stop it." President, 50 years old with hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Captain Nam, if we authorize this, how many ships can you make combat-ready?" "Give us 36 hours and we can launch 15 vessels," said. "They won't have full crews. We'll need volunteers from the modern fleet, survivors and civilians, but they'll fight." 36 hours, the president repeated. She looked at Admiral. "Do we have any better options?" The admiral's face was grim. "No, Madam President, we don't." "Then Operation Antique is authorized. Captain Nam, those ships are yours. Don't let us down." The transmission ended. Turned to his crew. Park, an engineer Lee, who had been listening quietly, was 33 and could fix anything that had ever been built. If anyone could wake these old ships, it was him. "We have a day and a half," said. "Let's get to work." The Heritage Station exploded into activity, and his engineering teams swarmed over the old vessels, checking every system. The Perseverance's ion drives hadn't fired in 2 centuries, but they were solid technology. Simple, fewer parts to break. Managed to bring the reactor online in just 6 hours, and the whole ship hummed with power. Took charge of the Indomitable, the 200-year-old warship with fission reactors and chemical rockets. The systems were even simpler, almost crude, but they worked. When fired up the main engines for a test, the whole ship shook, but it moved. It actually moved. Worked on the weapons systems across all 15 ships. That used electromagnetic force to hurl metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missile tubes loaded with warheads full of chemical explosives and shaped uranium. Nuclear torpedoes with simple fission triggers. Everything was manual. No AI assistance. No quantum targeting. Just humans calculating trajectories and pulling triggers. "It's like going back in time," said Tu as they loaded depleted uranium rounds into the Indomitables. "I trained on modern weapons. Everything was automated. This is so different." "This is how our ancestors fought," replied. "When losing meant extinction. They didn't have fancy computers to do the thinking. They had to be smart themselves." While the Heritage Station worked frantically, Earth's modern defense fleet prepared to intercept the near Jupiter. Commander Minyu Sung, 38 years old and hardened by years of patrol duty, led 50 destroyers and cruisers. They were the best ships humanity had built, equipped with quantum shields, plasma cannons, and AI systems that could predict enemy movements. Minyu stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the fleet approach on sensors. 200 alien ships, each one massive and powerful. They moved through space like sharks through water, smooth and deadly. "All ships battle stations," Minyu ordered. "Let's show them what humanity can do." The battle started badly. The human fleet opened fire first, launching plasma torpedoes and particle beams. The weapons struck the shields and simply disappeared. The alien defenses phased the energy into other dimensions, redirecting it harmlessly away. Then the returned fire. Their weapons were unlike anything Minyu had seen. Beams that made ships implode, folding in on themselves. Missiles that erased matter at the molecular level. One moment a human destroyer was there, the next it was simply gone, unraveled at the atomic scale. "Shields are useless," someone shouted. "They're passing right through." "Evasive maneuvers," Minyu ordered, but it didn't matter. The ships moved faster, turned sharper, anticipated every move. Their AI was too good, their technology too advanced. In 40 minutes, 70% of Earth's modern fleet was destroyed. Minyu's flagship was heavily damaged, its starboard side torn open by weapons he couldn't even understand. He gave the order to retreat, pulling back the survivors toward Mars orbit. He sent a transmission to Earth Command. "Admiral, they cut through us like paper. Our weapons don't touch them. Their weapons ignore our shields. I don't know how to fight this." Admiral received the message in the war room. He looked older, more tired. Around him, officers stared at displays showing the carnage near Jupiter. President was there too, her face pale. "We need to surrender," said quietly, "before they reach Earth, before more people die." "Wait," the president said. She pulled up another display showing the Heritage Station. "Captain Nam says he's ready. 15 ships. He wants to intercept the at Mars." 15 museum pieces against 200 advanced warships, shook his head. "Madam President, we just lost 50 modern ships in less than an hour. Those old vessels won't last 5 minutes. "Maybe," replied, "but Captain Nam believes they have a chance, and right now belief is all we have left." At the Heritage Station gathered the crews. 200 Heritage staff, 50 survivors from Menu's fleet, and 300 civilian volunteers. They stood in the main hangar, looking up at the 15 ancient warships. "I won't lie to you," said, his voice carrying across the space. "These ships are old. They're slow compared to modern vessels. Their armor is thick but primitive. Their weapons use technology from centuries ago. Many of you will think this is a suicide mission." He paused, looking at each face. Young and old, military and civilian, all of them scared but determined. "But these ships have something our modern fleet didn't have. They're simple, they're straightforward. They don't rely on sophisticated systems that can be hacked or disrupted. They hit hard and they keep going. That's what they were built for. That's what we're going to do." Lieutenant, 26 years old and one of the few survivors from Menu's fleet, raised his hand. "Captain, I fought them. I saw what their weapons do. How are our missiles going to be different?" "Because they won't expect it," answered. "They have conquered 100 worlds. They've fought sophisticated enemies using sophisticated weapons. They've never fought someone who just throws metal and explosives. We're going to hit them with the oldest trick in human history: brute force." Stepped forward, standing beside. "Everyone to your ships. We launch in 1 hour." The crews dispersed, running to their vessels, and headed to the Perseverance. On the bridge, the old displays flickered to life, showing green phosphor readouts and mechanical switches. Dr. I.M., a 39-year-old scientist who had volunteered, was already at the sensor station. "Targeting systems are online," reported, "but they're entirely manual. We'll have to calculate everything ourselves." "Good," said, settling into the captain's chair. It was old leather, cracked from age but still comfortable. "Ready all weapons. Plot an intercept course for Mars orbit." Outside, the 15 museum ships began to move. They were a strange fleet, each vessel from a different century, each with different capabilities. But they moved together, heading toward an enemy that had already destroyed everything modern humanity could throw at them. Looked at the chronometer. 24 hours until they reached Earth. 24 hours to prove that old weapons could still win wars. The museum fleet crossed the distance between Earth and Mars in 18 hours. Captain Nam stood on the bridge of the USS Perseverance, watching the red planet grow larger on the. Behind Mars, moving steadily forward, was the Armada. 200 ships that looked like flowing metal sculptures, beautiful and deadly. "They're broadcasting," Lieutenant Park reported from the communications station. "Audio only." "Let's hear it," said. Commander's voice filled the bridge, that same amused tone from his visit to the Heritage Station. "Captain Nam, is that you in those antiques? We detected your approach. 15 vessels, all using technology from your museum. This is your last defense." Picked up the microphone, an actual physical microphone, because the old systems didn't have voice activation. "This is Captain Nam of the Terran Heritage Fleet. You're trespassing in human space. Turn back now." The laughter that came through the speakers was loud and clicking. Multiple voices, all laughing. "The human sends toys to fight warships. This will be entertaining. We'll destroy you first, then we'll take your planet. At least you'll die quickly, Captain. That's more mercy than we usually show." The transmission cut off, set down the microphone and turned to his crew. At communications, Doctor I am at sensors, at weapons control, and young lieutenant at tactical. All of them looked nervous. "Remember what we talked about," said calmly. "Don't try to outthink them. Don't try to match their technology. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't stop. Load all. Give me firing solutions on the lead ships." "Sir, the oldest vessel is moving forward," reported, checking his display. "The Defiance. Captain is taking point position." Nodded. Captain was 70 years old, a retired officer who had volunteered to command the ancient carrier. The Defiance was the slowest, the oldest, the most primitive ship in their fleet. It made sense that would want to prove it could still fight. The Defiance moved ahead of the formation, its chemical thrusters leaving visible exhaust trails in space. On modern ships, propulsion was clean and invisible. This old vessel burned fuel and pushed exhaust, like humanity's first rockets centuries ago. The fleet adjusted their formation, clearly not considering the museum fleet a real threat. They didn't even raise their shields to full power. That was their first mistake. "Defiance is opening fire," announced. Through the watched as the old carrier launched its missiles. They weren't smart missiles. They didn't have AI guidance or quantum targeting. They were just metal tubes with rocket engines and warheads full of TNT and shaped uranium. Simple, crude, old. The missiles flew in straight lines toward the lead ships. The alien vessels detected them easily, their sensors tracking the primitive rockets. Their shields activated, preparing to phase the missiles into another dimension, the way they had phased all of Earth's modern weapons. But phasing required quantum uncertainty. It required the target to exist in multiple potential states. These missiles were just solid matter following ballistic trajectories. There was no uncertainty, no quantum states, just Newton's laws. The first missile hit a destroyer dead center. The chemical explosion was enormous, a bright orange fireball that bloomed in the darkness. The ship's shields had tried to phase it, but there was nothing to phase. The explosion happened in real space, with real chemicals burning at thousands of degrees. The alien ship's hull cracked open like an egg. The second missile struck another destroyer. The shaped uranium warhead punched through the armor before detonating. The ship broke apart, pieces spinning away into space. "Direct hits," reported, his voice shocked. "Both targets destroyed." On the flagship, Commander stared at his displays in confusion. 2 ships gone, destroyed by primitive chemical explosives. His tactical officer was equally baffled. "Commander, their weapons are too simple. Our shields tried to phase them, but there was nothing to phase. They're just solid matter and chemical reactions." "Increase shield power," ordered. "Prepare to return fire." But the museum fleet was already attacking. The Indomitable, 2 centuries old and massive, opened up with its electromagnetic cannons that used basic physics to launch tungsten carbide slugs at 3% of light speed. The slugs were just metal, heavy, dense, moving incredibly fast. The shields tried to phase them, tried to redirect them to other dimensions. But you can't phase something that's just obeying classical physics. The slugs punched through the shields like they weren't there. One slug hit a cruiser's engine section. The impact released kinetic energy equal to a small nuclear bomb. The cruiser's back half simply disintegrated. Another slug struck a battleship broadside, tearing a hole 10 meters wide through both sides of the hull. "Multiple hits," shouted. "Their shields aren't stopping us." Allowed himself a small smile. It was working. They had built their defenses to counter sophisticated weapons, energy attacks, quantum disruption. They had never considered someone would just throw heavy metal at high speeds. "All ships continue firing," ordered. "Prepare nuclear missiles." "Nuclear missiles armed and ready, Captain," replied, her hands moving over the old mechanical controls. The Perseverance launched 6 nuclear torpedoes. They were old-style fission weapons, using uranium-235 cores that split atoms through simple chain reactions. No antimatter, no quantum manipulation, just nuclear physics from the 20th century. The fleet detected the nuclear signatures and activated their matter disruption weapons, devices that could disassemble modern warheads at the molecular level. But fission reactions don't care about molecular disruption. Once the chain reaction starts, it continues until the uranium is spent. The first nuclear warhead detonated 2 kilometers from a dreadnought. The explosion was massive, releasing energy equivalent to 10 kilotons of TNT. More importantly, it released an electromagnetic pulse, a primitive but powerful burst of electromagnetic radiation. The dreadnought systems went haywire. Their sophisticated computers designed to process quantum calculations couldn't handle the crude but powerful EMP. Shields flickered and failed. Weapons systems shut down. The ship went dark. "EMP is affecting them," reported Excited Now. "Their systems are too refined. They can't filter out the raw electromagnetic interference." 3 more nuclear warheads detonated in rapid succession. More ships lost power, their delicate systems overwhelmed by simple electromagnetic radiation. Ships that could manipulate reality itself were disabled by technology from humanity's atomic age. The fleet began to panic. Commander watched his formation fall apart as ship after ship took damage or lost power. They were supposed to be invincible. They had conquered civilizations across the galaxy. How were they losing to museum pieces? "All ships return fire," commanded. "Show these primitives our power." The weapons activated. Beams that could collapse quantum states, missiles that could erase matter, cannons that reshaped molecular bonds. They fired at the approaching museum fleet. A beam hit the small frigate Relentless. The weapon tried to collapse the ship's quantum state to erase it from existence. But the Relentless was 200 years old. Its systems had no quantum components. The beam passed through it, affecting nothing. The ship kept coming, firing its. A matter disruption missile struck the Indomitable's armor. The warhead attempted to break apart the molecular bonds in the metal. But the armor was simple iron and carbon steel, held together by basic chemistry. The bonds were too strong, too fundamental. The warhead damaged the surface but didn't penetrate. "Their weapons aren't working either," said, almost laughing. "We're too primitive for them to hurt." The oldest ships in the fleet, the ones with the thickest armor and simplest systems, pushed forward aggressively. They absorbed hits that would have destroyed modern vessels. Their thick metal plating, designed to stop explosives and projectiles, worked just fine against exotic energy weapons that expected sophisticated materials. Captain's voice came over the fleet channel from the Defiance. "All ships, they can't hurt us. Charge forward. Ram them if you have to." 2 smaller museum ships did exactly that. The corvette Stubborn, built 180 years ago with armor 30 centimeters thick, crashed directly into a destroyer. The collision was devastating for both ships, but the Stubborn's simple construction meant it stayed mostly intact while the sophisticated vessel crumpled. Watch the battle unfold, tracking each ship on the old radar displays. They were winning, actually winning. The fleet was in chaos, unable to effectively fight an enemy that didn't use the kind of technology they understood. "Sir, they're trying to retreat," reported. "At least 50 ships are pulling back." "Don't let them regroup," ordered. "All ships pursue, keep pressure on them." The museum fleet pushed forward, firing continuously, hurled metal slugs, missiles launched with chemical rockets, nuclear warheads detonated. Everything primitive, everything simple, everything effective. On the flagship finally understood what was happening. These humans hadn't just sent old ships to fight. They had sent ships using technology so basic, so fundamental, that all of the sophisticated defenses were useless. It was like bringing advanced computers to a sword fight. The computers couldn't stop steel. "Pull back to Luna orbit," ordered reluctantly. "We need to analyze this and adapt our tactics." But wasn't going to give them that chance. "All ships full speed ahead, we end this now." The battle for Mars orbit continued, but the momentum had shifted. The supposedly primitive humans were driving back the supposedly advanced aliens, and everyone watching from Earth saw it happening in real time. The museum ships had proven their worth. Old technology, used the right way, was still deadly. The battle raged for 6 hours. Captain Nam felt every minute of it in his bones. The Perseverance shook with each shot, the old ship's frame groaning under stress it hadn't felt in 2 centuries. But it held together. These ships were built to take punishment. "Status report," called out, his voice hoarse from giving orders. Lieutenant Park checked her displays. "We've destroyed 87 ships confirmed. Another 40 are damaged and retreating. We've lost 4 vessels: the Courageous, the Dauntless, the Steadfast, and the Defiance." Felt a pang at that last name. Captain had gone down fighting, ramming his ancient carrier into a battleship when his weapons ran out. Both ships had exploded in a massive fireball. Had taken 200 crew with him, but he'd taken 500 too. "The remaining fleet is regrouping near Luna," Lieutenant reported. "About 120 ships. They're forming a defensive sphere around their flagship." Dr. Iam looked up from his sensor station. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy buildup in the flagship, something we haven't seen before. The energy signature is enormous." "On screen," ordered. The showed the flagship, a massive vessel 3 times the size of any other ship in their fleet. It was beautiful in a strange way, with curves and angles that seemed to shift as you looked at them. Now it was glowing, pulsing with purple light. Commander Minyu Sung's voice came through on the communication channel. He had brought his surviving modern ships from Mars to join the fight. "Captain Nam, our sensors are going crazy. Whatever they're charging up, it's powerful enough to destroy a planet." Chief Petty Officer ran calculations at her weapons station. "Captain, if they fire that at Earth, our old ships won't be fast enough to intercept. We need to take out that flagship now." "Agreed," said, "but that defensive sphere will be tough to crack. They've learned from the battle. They're probably adapting their tactics." And they had. The ships in the defensive formation weren't trying to use sophisticated shields anymore. They had switched to simple kinetic barriers, physical plates of armor that could stop slugs and missiles. They were learning. "We need a plan," said, studying the tactical display. "A direct assault will cost us more ships than we can afford." Thought fast. They had 11 museum ships left. They had 120 with that super weapon charging on the flagship. The odds were still terrible, but better than they had been. Called over the fleet channel to Doctor, who was aboard the Indomitable. "What's the most powerful weapon we have left?" His voice came back immediately. "The Perseverance still has 2 strategic nuclear missiles, 50 megaton yield each. They're planet crackers from the colony wars." 50 megatons, enough to level a continent, had never imagined actually using them. What's their effective range? Point blank, practically. They're too slow to hit a moving target at distance. Someone would have to deliver them directly to the flagship. A suicide run, in other words. Understood. He opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Captain Nam. We need a volunteer for a special mission. It's one way. I won't order anyone to do this." There was a pause. Then Captain from the light cruiser Valiant spoke up. "I'll do it, sir. My ship is already heavily damaged. Won't make it back to Earth anyway. Might as well make it count." "Captain, you have 300 people on your ship," said carefully. "I know, sir, and they all volunteered for this mission knowing they might not come home. We all did." There was pride in her voice. "We'll get that missile to the flagship. You just keep the rest of them busy." Felt a weight in his chest but nodded. "Acknowledged, Captain. All other ships were going to give the Valiant a clear path. Full assault on the defensive sphere. Make them look at us. The museum fleet accelerated toward the formation. The alien ships opened fire immediately, but they were using different tactics now. Instead of exotic energy weapons that didn't work, they had switched to plasma cannons and kinetic projectiles, weapons that were actually effective against the old human ships. The frigate Resolute took a direct hit from a plasma blast. Its armor melted and the ship began venting atmosphere. "Resolute reporting heavy damage," came the call. "We're pulling back." "Negative," came a different voice. "Captain of the Resolute. We're not pulling back. All power to forward guns. We're going in." The Resolute charged straight into the formation, firing everything it had. Blazing, missiles launching, even its point defense guns targeting enemy ships. It took hit after hit but kept going, drawing fire away from the other ships. Finally, a destroyer landed a killing blow. The Resolute exploded in a brilliant flash. But it had created an opening. Behind the chaos, the Valiant slipped through, moving fast on damaged engines. The cruiser was small and quick, weaving between ships. Some aliens noticed and fired, but the other museum ships covered it, launching missiles and barrages to distract them. On the bridge of the Perseverance, everyone watched the tactical display as the Valiant closed in on the flagship. The energy buildup in the alien superweapon was reaching critical levels. Purple lightning crawled across the flagship's hull. "Come on," whispered, "come on." The Valiant made it to within 500 meters of the flagship. Captain's voice came over the channel one last time. "For Earth, for humanity, for everyone back home." The strategic nuclear missile launched from the Valiant's forward tube. At the same time, the small cruiser activated its ramming speed, its chemical rockets burning at maximum. The missile flew straight toward the flagship's glowing weapon port. They tried to shoot it down, but the missile was moving too fast, too close. It struck the flagship's hull and penetrated deep inside before detonating. 50 megatons of nuclear fire exploded inside the alien vessel. The fission reaction was instantaneous and devastating. The flagship didn't just explode. It vaporized, along with the Valiant and 6 nearby ships. The shockwave rippled outward, damaging dozens more alien vessels. The superweapon, still charging, lost containment. Its energy overloaded and discharged randomly, destroying another 20 ships in a purple wave of exotic radiation. In the span of 3 seconds, the fleet lost their command ship and a third of their remaining forces. The remaining alien ships stopped firing. Their formation fell apart as ship captains tried to figure out who was in command now. Some ships began retreating immediately. Others held position, uncertain. Commander had been on the flagship. Now there was no flagship, no commander, no leadership. The fleet was leaderless and in chaos. "Sir, they're breaking formation," reported. "Multiple ships are fleeing the battle." Saw the opportunity. "All ships press the attack. Don't let them regroup." The remaining museum ships surged forward. The Indomitable, the Perseverance, the Relentless, and 6 others. They tore into the disorganized fleet, their old weapons proving just as effective in the cleanup as they had been in the main battle. Commander Menu's modern ships joined in, using their speed and maneuverability to chase down fleeing aliens. The sophisticated quantum weapons still didn't work well, but plasma cannons and kinetic weapons worked fine once the shields were down. The battle that had lasted 6 hours was over in another 30 minutes. The surviving ships, perhaps 40 of them, retreated to the edge of the solar system at maximum speed. They didn't stop to help damaged vessels. They just ran. On the bridge of the Perseverance, the crew stood in stunned silence. They had won. 15 old museum ships, backed by a handful of modern vessels, had defeated an invasion fleet of 200 advanced alien warships. Sat heavily in his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 52 years. "Casualty report," he said quietly. Pulled up the data. "We lost 6 ships total, approximately 1,800 crew. The modern fleet lost another 3 ships, total human casualties around 2,000. 2,000 dead. It was a terrible price, but the alternative had been the destruction of Earth and 8 billion people. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said. "It's from one of the fleeing ships, not someone else." "Put it through." A new face appeared on the screen, younger than with darker skin. "Human vessels, this is Sub-Commander of the Remnant Fleet. We are retreating from your system. We did not expect this outcome." "You underestimated us," said simply. "We did," admitted. "We thought advancement meant discarding old ways. You've shown us that wisdom is remembering them. We will not return. Your world is safe." The transmission ended, looked around at his crew, was crying silently, relief and grief mixed together, had her head in her hands, was staring at the in disbelief, looked like he might pass out. "Well," said, managing a tired smile, "I think we just proved these old ships still have some fight in them." Outside, floating in space among the debris of destroyed vessels, the surviving museum ships slowly turned toward home, battle-scarred, damaged, but victorious. They had done what no one thought possible. They had saved Earth with weapons from another era. And humanity would never forget the lesson. 6 months after the battle, Captain Nam stood in the rebuilt observation deck of the Terran Orbital Heritage Station and looked out at the ships. Some were the same vessels that had fought at Luna. Others were new additions, old warships that had been in storage or museums on Earth, now brought back to full combat readiness. The Heritage Station wasn't just a museum anymore. It was a military base, an active, operational facility that maintained a fleet of historical warships ready to fight if needed. President had authorized the creation of a new military division, the Historical Warfare Corps, and put in charge of it. "Still feels strange," said Commander Park, walking up beside him. She wore the new uniform of the Corps now with an extra stripe on her sleeve. "6 months ago we were curators, now we're combat officers." "Strange but necessary," replied. He looked at the Perseverance floating peacefully in its berth. The old dreadnought had taken 3 months to repair after the battle, barrels replaced, hull plating patched, reactor upgraded, though still using the same basic fission technology. "The galaxy needs to know we can still fight with these ships." They walked through the station together. It had grown significantly. New docking bays, larger crew quarters, expanded maintenance facilities. Where once 200 people worked, now there were over 2,000. Engineers, weapons specialists, historians, pilots, all of them trained in old technology. In the main hangar, Lieutenant was teaching a class of new recruits how to manually calculate firing solutions for. No AI assistance. No computer targeting. Just mathematics and physics, the way gunners had done it for centuries. "You need to account for relative velocity, acceleration, and orbital mechanics," explained, writing equations on an old-fashioned chalkboard. "Your target is moving. You're moving. Space itself might be bending due to nearby gravity. You calculate all of this in your head in real time while under fire." One of the recruits raised his hand. "Sir, why not just use the automated systems? They're faster and more accurate." "Because automated systems can be hacked," replied. "They can be disrupted. They can fail. Your brain can't be hacked. Your understanding of physics can't be disrupted. These old methods are slower, yes, but they're reliable. That reliability saved Earth." In another section, Doctor was overseeing the restoration of the destroyer Invincible, a 250-year-old warship that had been in a museum in Tokyo. Her team was carefully bringing its systems online, testing each component. "How's it looking?" asked, approaching her workstation. Smiled. "Better than expected. The kinetic missiles are fully functional. They need new magnetic coils, but the basic structure is sound. Give us 2 more months and she'll be combat ready." "Good. The Council wants us to have at least 30 ships operational within a year." 30 looked surprised. That's ambitious. That's necessary, corrected. Word about the battle has spread across the galaxy. Other species are watching us now. Some with respect, some with fear, some with curiosity. We need to show them this wasn't luck. This is who we are. In the command center, Admiral was reviewing reports. The old Admiral had changed after the battle. His skepticism about old technology had vanished, replaced by genuine respect. He now served as an advisor to the Historical Warfare Corps, helping integrate it with the modern fleet. Captain Nam said, looking up from his display, "I've been analyzing the battle data again. Do you realize how close it was? If they had adapted their tactics 1 hour earlier, if they had switched to kinetic weapons sooner, we might have lost." But they didn't, said. They were so confident in their advanced technology that they couldn't imagine it failing. That was their weakness. And now we've shown the entire galaxy that weakness, replied. Other species are going to copy our approach. They're going to start maintaining historical fleets too. Nodded. I know. I've already received communications from 3 different alien governments asking about our museum ships. They want to understand the principle. The principle was simple but profound. Technology advances, but physics stays the same. A chunk of metal moving at high speed will always be dangerous, no matter how advanced your shields are. A nuclear explosion will always release massive energy, no matter how sophisticated your defenses. The basics never become obsolete. They just get forgotten. Later that day, gave a presentation to visiting dignitaries from Earth's government and several allied alien species. The room was packed. Everyone wanted to hear from the man who had saved Earth with museum pieces. They made a critical error, explained, standing before a holographic display showing the battle. They assumed advancement meant leaving everything old behind. They saw our museum ships and thought primitive, obsolete, useless. They didn't see proven, reliable, effective. He advanced the display, showing footage of the Defiance launching its simple chemical missiles. These weapons are 300 years old, but they work. They work because they're based on fundamental principles that never change. Chemical combustion creates thrust. Kinetic impact releases energy. Nuclear fission splits atoms. These aren't sophisticated concepts. They're basic physics. An alien delegate, a tall being from the collective, raised a hand. Captain Nam, are you suggesting we abandon advanced technology? Not at all, replied. Advanced technology is valuable. Quantum shields, matter manipulation, AI targeting, all of these things are incredible achievements. But they're specialized tools. When you face an enemy using the same kind of specialized tools, they work. When you face an enemy using basic tools, suddenly your specialization becomes a vulnerability. He pulled up another image, showing the current heritage fleet. We now maintain both kinds of ships, modern vessels with the latest technology and historical vessels with proven technology. The modern ships are our first line of defense. The historical ships are our insurance policy. If an enemy can counter our advanced weapons, we fall back to weapons they won't expect. President stood to address the room. 6 months ago, we were hours away from surrender. Captain Nam and his crew saved us by thinking differently. They saw value where others saw obsolescence. That's the lesson we want to share with our allies. Don't discard your history. Don't forget what worked before. You might need it again. After the presentation, Dr. I'm approached with a tablet. Captain, you should see this. It's a message from the... Took the tablet and read. The message was from Sub-Commander, the officer who had led the retreat. Captain Nam, the Dominion has withdrawn from this region of space. Your victory has caused significant debate in our government. Many are questioning whether our focus on advanced technology has made us vulnerable. Some are advocating for a return to older methods, at least as a supplement. You have changed more than just one battle. You have changed how we think about warfare itself. Smiled slightly. Forward this to Admiral, he'll want to see it. That evening found himself back in the observation deck. his favorite place on the station, joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the mess hall. "Here," she said, handing him one. "Real coffee, not that synthetic stuff." They stood in silence, watching the museum ships, the Perseverance freshly repaired and gleaming, the indomitable but proud, the relentless, the stalwart, the unyielding. 9 survivors from the original 15, plus 6 new additions being restored. "Do you think we'll have to fight again?" asked quietly. "Maybe," admitted. "The galaxy is a big place. There are plenty of aggressive species out there, but now they know about us. They know that humans don't just use the latest technology, we use whatever works." "The old and the new together," said. "Exactly. That's our advantage. We remember our history, we preserve it, maintain it, and when necessary, we use it." Sipped his coffee. Other species saw these ships and laughed. Now they're studying them, trying to understand the principle. Some will get it, others won't. And those who don't will keep making the same mistake they made. They'll think old means useless, and if they ever threaten humanity again, they'll learn the same lesson. A new ship was being towed into the station, an ancient destroyer from the early space age. Chief Petty Officer was leading the restoration team. She had been promoted to Master Chief and now commanded all weapons operations for the Heritage Fleet. "What's that one?" asked. Checked his tablet. The destroyer Endeavor, 280 years old. Chemical rockets, fission reactor, and apparently it has something called a mass driver that can launch small asteroids at enemy ships. Laughed. "Throwing rocks." "Throwing rocks very fast," corrected with a grin. "Sometimes the simplest weapon is the best weapon." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. Outside the observation window, Earth hung in space, blue and beautiful and safe, protected by the most advanced fleet humanity had ever built, and by the oldest warships humanity had preserved. The Heritage Station's mission had changed from remembering the past to using the past. The museum ships were no longer just artifacts. They were tools, weapons, reminders that advancement doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. "Captain," said after a while, "thank you." "For what?" "For believing in these old ships when no one else did, for seeing their value, for saving all of us." Shook his head. "I didn't save anyone. These ships did. The crews did. All those people who fought and died believing that old weapons could still win wars. They're the heroes." "True," agreed. "But you're the one who gave them the chance to prove it." Later, sat in his quarters, writing the official history of the battle. Future generations would read about this day, about how humanity faced extinction and survived using weapons from the past. They would learn the lesson that they had learned the hard way. Never mock the old ways. They might save your life one day. The museum ships had proven their worth in blood and fire. Now they stood ready, ancient but operational, primitive but deadly. They were humanity's secret weapon, hidden in plain sight, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity's museum pieces again. Saved his report and looked out his small window at the Perseverance. The old dreadnought's lights were on, its systems humming, ready for whatever came next. "Until we're needed again, old friend," said softly to the distant ship. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the message went out to species across the galaxy. The humans remember their history. The humans preserve their old weapons. The humans will fight with whatever works, whether it's 300 years old or 3 days old. The humans are not to be underestimated. The museum ships had taught the galaxy that lesson, and it was a lesson that would not be forgotten.